think we can convene the facilities meeting. Ask for a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting. Motion get on the floor from Matt, seconded by Ron. Any changes, deletions, corrections? Hearing none, call the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved. And we'll start with buildings and grounds and turn it over to Frank.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a bunch of contracts that expire in December, and I know we won't be meeting again, so if we can run through these. The first two are, it's a bid for septic pumping and cleaning. We split it out into two contractors. Blue Diamond was low on everything, but they didn't bid on the porta potty rental. So Blue Diamond would be for the routine pumping and cleaning of the sites around the county, and then the Stone Industries would be for the porta potties.
Okay, motion to get it on the floor by John, seconded by Matt. Any discussion, questions? Hearing none, call the question. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? So moved.
The next one is an electrical contract. This is for any repair or emergency that our electrician in-house can't handle. We very rarely use it, but we do keep someone on call. And it was Jay McBain was the lowest bid.
Okay, motion to get it on the floor by Matt, second. Second by John. Discussion? Hearing none, call the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved.
Next one is elevator maintenance, and that's for the sheriff, for the municipal center. It doesn't include the HSB buildings. That's still under warranty, so it's a different contractor.
Okay, motion to get that on the floor by Matt, seconded by Ron. Discussion? Hearing none, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Next is BPI Mechanical. It's the same as the electrical contract. It's HVAC repair and rehabilitation. For the most part, we do our own, but there's occasions where we need to call someone in.
Okay, motion to get it on the floor. John, second. By Matt. Discussion? None from the supervisors. Travis.
Thank you. BPI was the contractor that installed this under the Siemens contract, and that contract is still in effect. So I would think that Siemens has guaranteed that equipment is working. So I'm wondering what repairs, and I've also thought that they actually were taking care of a lot of that expense. So my question would be, how much of this expense has to do with the equipment that BPI put in 2007 or so, and why is it that we would pay anything? Why wouldn't Siemens?
Okay, Frank, are you prepared to answer that, or you want?
Yes. Siemens does take care of the municipal center contract, or any heat pump in the municipal center. We have heat pumps throughout the county. Warrensburg has heat pumps. The HSB building wouldn't be under that contract, but anything under that original Siemens contract, they take care of as if it was their own pump.
Right.
Sure.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, no other discussion. Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So moved.
The next one is the lawn care, fertilizer, herbicide, and pesticide application, and Grasshopper Gardens was the low response.
Okay, motion to get it on the floor by Matt, second by Ron. Discussion? Hearing none, call the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved.
And then the final one, we haven't received the bids back yet, but it's for fire suppression on all the fuel sites throughout the county. We're looking for permission to award to the lowest responsible bidder.
Okay, can I have a motion to get it on the floor by John, seconded by Matt? Any discussion or questions? Hearing none, call the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved.
Okay, under information and discussion items, the court project update, on page 22, there's an update, and I believe Kevin Hajos has some other information.
Yep. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, besides what's on that sheet, I just want to give everybody an update on where we're at. We're approximately 3 months ahead of schedule. and we're actually under budget right now. Not by much, but we are under budget. The critical path for us now is to have the contractor stay on site and not leave site for a period of time. But that would involve us, and since we're 3 months ahead of schedule, moving the courts earlier than what we had originally planned. The courts were supposed to be moved into there, I want to say, probably the beginning of June. We're looking to try to get them in there by March 1st, since we are ahead of schedule. So Clark Patterson and myself have sat down and gone through a sequencing of what needs to take place here on out to get them in there. And we're going to sit down, I just sent out an email this morning to all the courts and everyone else involved, sit down and have a meeting to see if we can coordinate this and get them in there by March 1st. There will be some minor soft items probably going on at the same, or soft, it'll be sort of a soft turnover of the building. There'll still be some probably punch list items that need to be taken care of. But for the most part, if the courts would agree and we can coordinate everything with furniture and IT and security, we can have them in there by March 1st.
Okay, would you be prepared to, in January, to give an update of where you're at in your success rate with the courts?
We're expecting probably sometime next week, and it looks like right now it's going to be Tuesday the 5th that we're going to have a meeting with everybody involved, all the stakeholders, and to see if we can get this going. The other thing that I got word of this morning is that National Grid has finally put in the meter, and they believe that they will be back today to turn on the power.
Okay, Claudia?
Thank you, Supervisor. Regarding the comment that we are under budget, does that have anything to do with change orders and increasing the budget, or is it based on our original budget?
Okay, Kevin?
It is from change orders, and it's a lot of credit. We have asked the contractors, all the contractors involved, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm cutting corners. We've asked the contractors if there's savings, some value engineering that they can do, such as like some of the mill work. We found another company that had a cheaper cost for the mill work, but it's the same mill work, but it's just at a cheaper cost. So that's why we're under budget at this time. As I said, it's not significant. It's probably maybe $35,000 to $50,000 right now.
Does that answer your question, Claudia?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else questions? Okay.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is a new asbestos report. We had asked Clark Patterson to update our asbestos estimates, our budgetary estimates from a prior report. So that's that starts on page 23. You'll see those estimates there, and then we also attached some of the material from the prior report just to get everybody up to speed. But the current estimates are on page 24, and then in particular with the design report that was done back in 2008, you see on page 32. Page 32 in particular, there's a table a little bit towards the bottom of the page there that shows, that is a summary of the asbestos containing material that was identified in the past. So as of right now, there isn't a budgeted project to do this work, but at least this is a point of reference going into next year if we want to establish a project and do any abatement in the old jail.
Committee have any discussion on this? Ron?
So, am I reading it correct? It's 98,000, is that the estimate for, no, that's soil. What's it gonna cost to remove the asbestos? I don't...
So option 2 is the removal cost
Right.
under item 6. There's a concern that some of the crawl space areas that are exposed soils may have debris on them. So we're probably going to have to look at that a little closer to see if any of the fittings had degraded to the point where they had sprinkled into the soil. It's very hard to isolate that once that occurs. So we included a cost in there as a contingency to remove 2 inches of soil from all of those crawl space areas. That had not been identified in the past as a potential concern, and in review, we thought it would, we should at least consider that may occur.
The other question that I had is that I see on page 32, we're talking about the caulking on the window caulking, and if for some reason we were going to try to use one of those buildings, we had a discussion the other day, the corrections department is coming up to have a meeting here, and with regards to the age 16, you know, they have to be incarcerated separate from the regular prison. We're not sure whether it ought to be a dormitory or a prison type of setting. So they're going to come up and look at it. If we could take the asbestos out of the jail, the old jail, would we have to remove the windows? Because it says there's caulking in the windows.
You'd have to re-caulk, you'd have to reseal the windows. They'd probably have to be taken out during the abatement and then either reinstalled with modern material or perhaps replaced. You know, I think, you know, frankly, before the conversation regarding reusing that jail goes very far, I think you want to do a code review.
Absolutely.
Because I think it's highly unlikely that we'll be able to use the jail for anything.
Okay.
It doesn't meet standards it didn't meet the standards, you know, when we built the new jail. I just don't believe it's feasible.
Yeah. So I mean, we're just trying to open the door to say, is this something that can be used? If it can't, one of the supervisors the other day referenced that maybe we ought to think about the detention house. Well, we're just not sure what kind of a facility the state is looking for. I mean, the detention house sounds good, except it's not really a jail. And what do you do with a 16-year-old it's a felon, you know, that is maybe a dangerous person. So, well, but at least we're working on it. I guess the point is that in order to knock this building down, we still got to get the asbestos out.
Yes.
So we're going to spend $98,000 to get the asbestos out. Then we got to knock the building down, and that's what? That's $400,000. Is that the option?
The option one includes everything, so that includes the abatement and demo.
Okay, so I mean, I think for the future, that's something that the new supervisors and the new board will have to think about. The building is there, we can't use it for anything, we got to abate it, and maybe knocking it down is the answer. But it's $250,000, it's a $400,000 deal.
Okay. Doug?
Yeah, I think the state's pretty clear when we're talking about this, what type of facility they want for these the juveniles. And they don't want it in a jail setting, so that will never fly. And from a cost standpoint, from the state will say that will fly, the old jail. I mean, that's just not going to fly. So that's a discussion for another day. We're not discussing that today. I mentioned the detention center yesterday as a possible option. That's for another discussion. But concerning what to do now, so really, what do we do now with this? Really, that's the question of the day, right? It won't be. We're not going to be able to use it for the kids or the young juveniles. That's not going to happen. So, what do? Do we demo it, $403,000, and take it down? Do we leave it as is? I don't even know if that's an option, Jeff, to leave it as is. Obviously, you stated that it has never passed any of the codes in today's code were in today's new business codes. So we really have no options for it, other than the way I see it is either we leave it like it is or we tear it down. That's going to be ultimately the two options. Am I correct on that, Jeff?
I would just nuance that a little bit, and that if you're gonna tear it down, I would recommend that you have a plan for what's going to occur there after. Because it's attached to the building, so if you remove that section of the building, you need to either restore the facade somehow with the existing building that will remain, or if there's going to be new construction, a new addition added, you wouldn't want to spend the money, you know, kind of sealing up the building and repairing the facade and then turn around and add an addition on. So I would recommend the most efficient way would be to have a final plan of what you're going to do with that footprint.
Thank you.
And then until then, the building is sealed up. You know, we've got the arraignment area going in a portion of it, but until then, I think it can sit.
And Doug, it's in answering some of your questions, this has been a reoccurring issue as far as addressing what to do with it. And we've
we've discussed everything, got other prices. I think Jeff referenced some of the work we had done engineering-wise previously. We update them cost-wise, et cetera, but we had once considered tearing it down and putting it into the bond with the court edition, but when the court edition is, spiked at 16 million, we took that out, that option, as far as alleviating that. So we're back to where we've been, just letting it sit or trying to find options for it. I'm sorry, Claudia, go ahead.
Thank you. Shouldn't we move forward with the abatement, though? Because either way, we have to get the asbestos out of there, even if we're going to demo it. And at least that way it's somewhat prepared if we are going to use it for some
Maybe
future purpose.
Frank or Jeff can address, there were some issues with the asbestos in the windows area and what that would involve to do a complete abatement and the removal of the windows and then what you had after the fact. So there's discussion as, did we want to get into that?
Couldn't you take out the, I don't know, couldn't you do that without the window aspect?
I would just, the area is contained. It's not a risk to people, or it's not like it's imminent danger to the public or to employees or anything else. It is more efficient to do the abatement in conjunction with demolition. So it would be more efficient to do it all at once.
They have the cost the same.
Actually, it's a little bit different, but it will be. I'm just saying that my experience has been that if they're demoing the building, their methodology for abating will be more efficient. They're gonna abate it as efficiently as possible, and not worry about damaging windows, not worrying about damaging anything. I think it's a more efficient way to go. There is no urgent need to abate the area. The only reason to abate it would be if we're going to go in and modify it somehow. And if there's no plans to do that, then the material sits there and waits for a future plan.
John?
I'm looking at the building. I mean, a perfectly good, solid brick building with foundation, with infrastructure, with wiring. I mean, how much would it cost to replace that building? So if we could use it for a training facility, for classrooms, for storage, for something, it's there. There's got to be some value to that building. That's a substantial building. I mean, what would that cost to recreate that building today? A couple million? So I'm just, let's abate the asbestos. There's going to be a future use for that somehow, some way. I just have a hard time saying we're going to demolish it and then someday build another multi-billion-dollar building right there where there's something there that's already there. I'm looking at it.
Jeffrey?
I was just going to say that, the challenge we always run into is change of use and meeting codes. So the minute there's a change of use, we have to meet current code.
Yeah, but it's got to be less expensive than rebuilding another building.
I don't know.
Matt?
I agree. If we can use it, we need to use it. I don't know how we get to that point to find out, where that is. But assuming that building pans out that we can't reuse the building and it needs to be demolished, this $115,000 for site restoration, it's just backfilling the topsoil. Is that a contractor cost, or is that something that we could save $115,000 by doing it now?
These are contracted costs.
So we could save money.
I don't know that we'd save,
We wouldn't save 115. I mean, other than the topsoil. I'm just asking.
I haven't delved into the numbers to tell you what we could do it, with highway personnel. And I mean, I'd back charge a project if I used highway personnel, but it wouldn't be prevailing wage.
Ron was next.
Well, the one concept that our chairman talked about is a one and done kind of concepts. Are there one and done things? And that's why I asked for the new price on the abatement, just the abatement alone. And if it was something that we thought that building might have a future for us, I said we got to get the abatement done. So here it is. It's $92,000. Is that something that it's not budgeted, but it would be something that I thought we would use as part of our surplus to take care of that. But again, we really don't have, I think the Director of Public Works is right. We don't have a plan for the future, but whatever we do, we got to take the asbestos out of there.
Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would also like to echo my concerns about just demoing the building. Even if a new building were to cost $2 million and to renovate would cost $1 million, that's $1 million savings. Complete hypothetical numbers, of course. But would it be a stretch to get another option, cost estimate, renovating the building, bringing it up to code, along with the abatement process? As you mentioned, it's more efficient to do the abatement in conjunction with the bigger project as a whole.
Which code? I mean,
Just
what,
to
what's
make
the
it
use?
to make it usable. Again, it would just
For,
be a cost
for what?
estimate.
But what the purpose drives the code you follow.
So for the sake of time,
you have to know what
Yep.
the purpose is to know what section of the code you're looking
So
at.
that's a great point. And just for the sake of this conversation, what would it cost to bring that specific building up to snuff for a possible detention center, or as Supervisor Stroud alluded to, classrooms that would work in conjunction with that detention?
I think in
home?
order to get to that, the board would have to decide what the use is, and then there'd have to be another study, another review by an architect. I don't have the staff with that expertise. There had been maybe some preliminary reviews in the past, maybe when we did a space study.
Yeah.
Maybe, probably
This asbestos report was taken out of
a space study.
feasibility study.
So we could.
Two other issues. There was the low ceiling, and putting HVAC in was a difficulty because it's 8-foot ceiling. And are we speaking at all to the bars and the lead paint and the removal and that abatement?
Yeah, and I think they got into some of the structural elements as well, where the removal of those bars was significant impact on the structure itself. So, I mean, I haven't looked at this study in a long time, but I could come back to committee with, and maybe what we can do is distribute copies of the study if you're interested in what was looked at before. I don't think it got to a point where there was a clear. There might have been some preliminary estimates there, but I think again it's critical that if we're going to come up with a cost to meet code, we have to know what code we're looking at. And I think, using it for juvenile detention versus using it for office space, versus using it for cold storage, versus using it for classrooms, they're all different requirements through the code. So that's really the only way to do it efficiently would be to decide what you want to use it for, then do another updated review.
Okay. I think that whatever direction we end up deciding to go, I think that element is essential for the final decision-making process of what we're going to do with that building. So whether it is classrooms, whether it is just office space, I think we need something to look at, some sort of cost
So
estimate.
what we'll do is we'll take that prior study and get a bunch of copies made and make that available, maybe post it on the web, or if you want hard copies, we can distribute that. I think that's a starting point to see what was done in the past.
Starting point was good. Thank you.
Claudia?
I almost forgot my point, but I was thinking I support Supervisor Montesi's position that we should do the abatement. And we're just kicking the can down the road, and it's just going to get more expensive. And from what I'm looking at in front of me, $84,000 versus $92,004 isn't that much of a difference to do it without demoing the building. So I would be in favor of going forward with the abatement.
Okay. Chairman?
Yeah, I had asked that comparison be made. Demolition of the building, disposal of the contaminants, asbestos, as opposed to going in there surgically and taking the asbestos out. And I wanted to know the cost differential because we might not be prepared to make a decision on the reuse of the building when it is a parking lot. So that's what I was looking for. If Claudia's numbers are correct, then there may be some efficiencies to have it part of the demolition, but it seems to me that those numbers are significant. The The other thing would be on the windows. Am I assuming correctly, Jeff, that the issue with the caulk is lead in the caulk? Is that the issue with the windows?
It's asbestos in the...
Asbestos in the caulk. It would seem to me, in order to keep the envelope correct and enclosed, you leave the windows for now. Take the asbestos out of the cost differential, from all this is being reflected here. Take the asbestos out until you know what you're going to do with the building, because you don't know what windows are going to go where, whatever was going to be enclosed, what's not, and then you leave that decision for another day. And you don't lose anything, you don't lose any ground by doing it in 2 years. In fact, perhaps you even expedite that process in some fashion. Did I hear the numbers correct, Jeff? The differential, the efficiencies, 10 to 15,000 something.
Yes, but if you split the abatement into 2 phases, the cost will go up significantly. Because part of the cost is the decontamination area, the air monitoring that's occurring. So if you split it into 2 projects and you wait on the windows, then the cost will increase. You know, it's not just simply do this, you know, do 75% now and 25% later. You end up with a separate project, you end up with separate air monitoring, separate decontamination areas, separate setup, and everything else.
Let me follow on that. So that price included the remediation of the windows and the reinstallation of the windows, just boarding it up, or what went into that cost structure?
Can I jump in on it?
Yeah, sure.
I posed that same question to Clark Patterson when they had given us this proposal. That is to remove that caulk off the windows and then put the windows back and re-caulk with normal caulk. It's not to leave the original measurement.
Really? And that cost again, one more time on that cost?
I believe it was 84,000 or not, I'm not sure.
Well, we've got 92,400.
As opposed to a demolition estimate as part of the demolition of what number?
84,000.
Just before I call you, Frank, could you chime in here? Most of this, I thought the vein we were looking at this at the point in time when Ron brought it up was we were going to have one and done projects where we had money left over from whatever this year that we could expend to take care of stuff like this. Is that a position we're in, or is we're, in other words, financially, if we chose to move this forward, is it a good thing? Is this a recommendational thing? You have money somewhere? What's your opinion? Okay, so the one and done reference was spoken of earlier in the year under a reference like we had a pot of money that this would be a good thing to use it up for, or possibly we saved it. Yes, just yeah, exactly. And that fund balance has been significantly used. At yeah. Okay, so that that has value as far as moving forward.
Well, I mean,
just a second, Mr. Kelly, you had something to add?
Yeah, Mike Weil, I'm sorry. Jeff, question for you, and this involves asbestos and the drivers to do something about it. There's friable asbestos, which is stuff that's floating in the air, and there's also stuff that's contained. And I'm wondering if this caulk is contained, so it's not really a problem. Is it like a silicone caulk with asbestos in it?
Yeah, I don't think the caulking is friable. And like I said, that's why there isn't an imminent danger where this is contaminating the area, a risk to employees, a risk to the public, or anything else. The problem really becomes in once you disturb it. If you're going to modify the building and disturb it, you have to abate it prior to doing that.
But if those windows stay, then you wouldn't have to abate this at all. They could just stay because it's not friable and it's not a risk to anyone.
I think, I don't know if the new codes would come into play depending on the change of use. You might have to change the windows because they were built when the original building was built in 1960.
Bars on them.
Oh, there's bars on it, so.
Would not necessarily have to do the windows because of some type of...
I think it would be driven by the purpose of use. As Frank just reminded me, there's bars on the windows, so depending on the use, that may be forbidden by code to have bars on the window. They are egress.
Rachel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have 2 quick questions. it looks like in 2008, when the initial study was done, I'm wondering what the cost was, if it was even factored at that point, your documents that you attached to the end of the agenda. And I'm also wondering, since I've been on this board, we've talked about OES and the storage problems for the vehicles. I know it's come up a couple of times about the height of the ceilings and what could be done, but again, I see that as a pending item on this agenda. When you're talking about codes, I would think it would be much easier to talk about storage of vehicles in there versus trying to make that into a training center or office space, whatever it might be. Is that an option still for OES?
See, I don't think we ever looked at that, but the building was never made to hold vehicles.
Right.
So the only area that could hold vehicles on that side are the garage areas that have some equipment in them now, but those were built for.
Right, and that's OES equipment.
Yeah, so.
For the most
So
part.
you can't make it viable for the OES storage need that we have?
You would never, no, you'd never be able to put vehicles in a structure like that.
Okay, and then, so what was the cost in 2008, this April 11th, 2008 report? Was there one done? So we could see
I
what
think
the
it was
cost
in the
was
same,
then.
it was in the same order of magnitude.
Oh, it
you know,
was?
It was, so.
So we aren't seeing a big jump in cost over 20 years?
No.
For 10 years?
No, I think it was in the same order of magnitude.
Was that 360?
That, for the
Oh,
complete demo?
demolition.
So my point just being, it's not like we're talking double the cost 10 years later to take care of this problem versus, you know, now, 2008 versus now. So if it's not affecting anyone in a negative way in terms of health issues and the cost isn't significantly more, certainly you could wait till you determine what type of use you want that building for before rushing to remove any type of asbestos.
I have a question, Dan.
Go ahead.
What about tapping into our environmental fund that we set aside for cleaning up properties, to clean up our own properties? We understand we have a balance of $230,000 in that fund. Why not use some of that to clean the asbestos out of this building? Is that doable?
I think we'd have to look and see how that was set up.
But I mean, there's the environmental money that we set aside each year from the auction, and why not tap into that to do what's right and clean the asbestos out of this building?
I think we just have to look at how the original resolution was written up, and if it wasn't, I'm sure we could amend it.
Just a reminder from where we were, 2008 we requested a study, and it came back, then we hit financial straits with the economy, etc. So everything was cut back, and that was just put in mothballs. As we got healthier financially, and we were looking at other projects like the jail expansion, etc., that we also mothballed for 8 to 10 years, we were considering what to do with it. Once again, we're cycling the other way again. We're, in a few years we might not be as healthy as we are. So that is the reasoning why it's sat the way it is, and it keeps getting brought up, and financially stops. Ron?
Just as a reminder, Mr. Treasurer, I thought we had somewhere around 25 to 27 million in surplus. And you said we needed 9 to 14 to stay relevant.
We need between 10 and 16 million.
Okay.
That's what the current resolution states.
And we have that.
And we have about 17.
Okay.
Our current 5-year plan has us at 5 to 6 million within 4 or 5 years. So I mean, in 3 years. In 3 years, we're going to be below what the treasurer feels is even close to a healthy position. So, I mean, we're not awash in money. I know some people think we are. We are far from awash in money up here. And to be taking on projects that, in all due respect, I think we can wait on this. I don't see an urgency. It's not a health crisis. So we don't know what we want to do with it. So I don't know. It doesn't make business sense to me to go ahead and do that unless we know what our final plan is. That doesn't make sense.
Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, I agree with Supervisor Beatty in regards, I wouldn't really want to go into the fund balance to take care of this right now. I think Supervisor Garrity makes a good suggestion of looking at an alternative option if we were to do that right now. But I think barring that, having a comprehensive plan of how we're going to renovate it, I think that would probably be the most efficient use of funds if that environmental fund is not an option.
Okay, do we want to make a decision here moving forward, like if the environmental funding could be used? Do we want to continue on with the abatement? Is that something that the committee wants to entertain? Do we?
Let's find that out if we could use that, and then we can...
Then you
the
can make a
next board
decision
can
on
make
that?
a decision, sure.
Okay, so, all right, that's good enough? Okay, and then the update on the OES equipment storage.
The welding is complete at the Lower Warren Street property. The generator is shipping today and it'll be here next week, so we'll have that in next week. Fencing is due to be installed on the 11th of December that separates the trash operation from the storage area. Lights will be finished today, and we should be completely done in there by the 15th of December. We're going to do a final walkthrough with codes. I talked to Mr. Wallace this morning. He doesn't have any issues, but he just wants to do a final walkthrough with me next week. And so we should be ready for equipment storage down there by mid-December.
Is Brian aware of the timetable?
Yes.
Okay. Matt, you had a question? Anyone have questions?
Oh, just thank you, Frank and DPW for getting that job done. I mean, we've wrestled with that a long time. We beat up Ryan because he wanted to build a new building, and we said, no, we do have the building, and we got the job done. It's great.
Privilege of the floor. Anyone have anything come? I'm sorry, Frank?
There's one item, the lighting upgrade. There was the one before.
Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped it.
I just have some information, quick information. I'm working with two different companies right now. Rise Engineering, who works through NIMO, is doing a complete study, an energy study of what we can do to be more energy efficient here. I don't think it's going to be a whole lot because we've done a lot of it already. But included in that study will be the LED lighting, which is our big thing now. And then I have another company that is working through ASCO Electric. ASCO Electric is on state contract for purchasing lighting material. So they're working with ASCO and with us, excuse me, to come up with a plan and a dollar amount for replacement of all our lights, with my forces doing the work over the course of the winter. The other one with Rise Engineering is kind of dependent on National Grid's, they give us a certain amount of money, but you have to install within a certain amount of time. So I'm looking at both options, and hopefully by the next meeting I'll have some complete numbers, and we can make a decision from there on how we want to proceed.
Okay, last night I attended Cornell Cooperative's meeting, and Director Seeley had gone through that for the LED replacement lighting, and National Grid had given him a price, and he thought it was too much money for them to come up with their percentage. And I don't know what the renegotiation schedule was or whatever, but they actually reduced it in half. I don't know what the reasoning was, or if there's a bargaining point. Matt, did you get anything out of it?
I was really shocked that
Yeah.
30% to 60% negotiating. So
Yeah, so-
I'm a little leery of these surveys because they use estimated kilowatt usage for their savings in the end to show that it's going to, the payback period is going to be X. And
I personally think our best bet is going to be for us to purchase the material and do the work ourselves. We've done a lot of it, but what this outfit is doing for us is they're going light by light, and they'll determine whether our ballasts need to be replaced. That's the big cost factor here. It's not the tubes. But a lot of these lights have ballasts in them that will work with LED lights. So.
Oh, okay. So, John, you had the question?
Yeah, I mean, Travis can chip in too, because Travis and Brian Clements had originally come to me with Rise Engineering, And they gave a figure that, you know, it really wasn't competitive at the time. I mean, it was more along the line with everybody else, so we were still seeking and looking into doing it ourselves. However, Rise Engineering came back and said, listen, National Grid has put more money into the pot because they want to get a certain quota done by a certain time, and that their schedule wasn't being met, so they're throwing extra money into it as long as the project gets done by December 31st. So the original project for redoing all the LED lighting for the two buildings was, I think, around $38,000. Rebates, it would be $28,000. And then with the extra money that National Grid was going to kick in, as long as we got it done by the end of the year, ended up being $14,000. So, you know, a quick estimate is that we wouldn't be able to do that on our own. And with the rebates and everything else, that was a good deal. But the stickler was you had to have it done by the end of December. So.
All right. Thank you. Claudia?
I just wanted to comment that I'm glad Frank is pursuing this because it's going to help us with our cost savings in the end, and it will be good energy savings, energy efficiency for the building. And it will cost some money up front to change out the lights, but we have the money from Siemens that was supposed to go towards possibly replacing heat pumps. But we've determined that that was not going to be economically feasible. So that I think this is a good alternative for us to look at and spend some of that money on a project like this. This is
Frank?
The other thing that having RISE and NIMO look at this will do for us is it'll identify any other areas that we might have some savings in. I mean, we know there's savings in the LED lights, but maybe there's some other areas where we'll want to address down the road.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, privilege of the floor. Travis.
Well, just to comment on that last one, I just wanted to say that Frank Morehouse that gave the suggestion originally about Rise Engineering. I want to thank him for that. It worked out extremely well for the town. Previous to this, we had, the only other estimate that I saw was $190,000 to do what they were suggesting that they could do for 30. But then magically they cut that in half to 14. Seems like it was like a once in a lifetime deal. When we looked into it, I'm glad that we were there, and I'm glad that the council provided that. It's probably not what you're going to see going forward, but it's still a very good return on investment even without that additional savings. And you know, I think Frank he's doing everything in the right direction, and I really want to thank him for the suggestion to look at that in the first place.
Thank you. Anyone else? Privilege of the floor. Okay, with that, Frank, I think we're all set with you. We'll open up the airport agenda.
Okay, we'll turn it over to Ross.
Yeah. You have a teleconference.
Okay, on airport, on the first item is a request to establish a capital project. This is for replacing the airport security system. And I included a summary of the issues we're having with our current system that Ross provided me. Long story short, our current system was installed back in 2005. It's no longer supported by the vendor. It's maxed out as far as the access control points we can have on it, and we're at risk right now of the system failing and not being able to repair it. So what I'm recommending is an establishment of a capital project, and our current budgetary estimate is $38,000 to replace the software and add some additional control mechanisms, and then also integrate the camera system with the security system. And what I'm recommending is that we establish that and we fund it out of A892, which is our airport repair and projects reserve.
And there's money there?
Yes.
Okay, motion to get on the floor by Matt, second by John. Questions, comments? Hearing none, call the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved.
Okay, the next item is on page 5. That's a transfer request. This is
a transfer from our transfers to capital projects, which is A9950, into our airport contracts code. This will allow a reimbursement to the highway division for a large culvert pipe that was replaced on taxiway Delta, and also the emergency access road.
Okay, motion to get it on the floor. Motion by John, seconded by Matt. Discussion. Rachel?
How much was the emergency access road? What did that end up costing? I thought I saw a number somewhere.
Let me see if I have that with me. I want to say it was it was about half of that. So, do you recall, Kevin? I can get back to you on the exact amount. This money will go into as a revenue into the highway division, and then at the end of the year that gets returned to the highway fund. So the money is actually just moving from airport over to highway fund.
How much is the road?
Off the top of my head, I think it was somewhere in the $70,000 range. And that reimbursed all labor, and then we use the equipment rate, which is the statewide established equipment rate, the same ones we use for CHIPS reimbursements.
Claudia?
Which taxiway was it? I think you said D, but I'm not sure where that is.
Yes, Delta. So if you were at Balloon Fest where the buses park,
Okay.
that's the taxiway Delta. So if you're looking out onto the airfield from the terminal building, it would be to the south side, to your left.
Any other questions? Travis?
Was this money covered by grant? 95%?
No.
Was it ever approved by the board?
Yes, we had two separate approvals. The access road was part of a plan that was established several years back and approved by the board. The culvert pipe was one that I brought to committee, and we actually had to move some money for the initial purchase of the pipe, and then this portion of it reimburses the equipment. We rented some equipment, and we used highway personnel for the installation.
Any other discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved.
Okay, the next item I have on here, the Airport Advisory Group. I thought maybe Supervisor Sokol would want to give an update, or anybody else on that, but I haven't. Rachel?
Yeah, happy to fill in for him. He just took over the Airport Advisory Group in part of our transition planning for next year, and graciously did that. And I know Supervisor McDonald is still a member on that, as is Travis Whitehead, who's here, and several other members. So in the spirit of that planning, Supervisor McDonald, do you want to give a report of what took place?
Essentially, we discussed the viability of that committee, and if we were going to carry on with that committee into the following year. And it was basically unanimous amongst the committee members that they felt that their input was worthwhile, and even though we didn't see, or there wasn't as much action as we had originally anticipated, we still feel like it was valuable input nonetheless. So we're going to continue into the following year with that committee. That pretty much.
And they made a recommendation about a fly-in. I talked about it at the board meeting.
Yep.
So I think that was supposed to be conveyed over to you, Dan, for consideration from facilities. So I hope you've seen that information. And if you haven't, if you would hook up with Amanda to get that information so you could talk about it at the next facilities meeting. And again, they just are really hoping to take a look at that draft proposal so that they can give you their expert advice back as well. But I was pleased to see that everyone thought it was a productive year, even though it was a little slow going. They were very happy with it, and that private-public relationship seems to be going really well. And thank you to everybody who's volunteered on that for the last year. So it's been helpful.
Okay, Jeff?
As far as the AOPA fly-in, that's something that Ross had initiated probably 2 years ago now. I think it's already come through committee, and a proposal was submitted, and Ross coordinated with the Pilots Association. In particular, Harrison Freer was helpful to Ross in developing that proposal and submitting. Ross had followed up probably a year or so ago with the site selection committee, and we're still in consideration for future years. They moved that fly-in event into different areas in the region, and you know, we got positive feedback from the selection committee when Ross followed up with them. So we think that's going to happen. It's just a matter of what year it'll be, you know, where they want to have it in upstate New York. So so that's already underway, and Ross has been coordinating that with the Pilots Association for help. I think Harrison is, I think he was one of the national officers for AOPA at one point.
Oh, really?
If he's not still. I know he was very heavily involved, so he was helpful in submitting that proposal.
Okay. You got a balloon festival overtime?
Yes, there was a referral item here, that item 2, that I wanted to respond to. So on page 6 is a summary that Ross put together. Again, if our overtime is in the solid blocks, going back as far as 2012, and then our total revenue is in the diagonal line block. So I know there was some concern that this past year we actually got some assistance from the town of Queensbury and reimbursed them for their overtime costs. Our overtime costs were much lower because we had fewer people on site, and even with their costs, we did see an uptick again because the weather was so great. We had 5 successful launches at the airport, and you know, so they went late into the night, didn't get weathered out, which has happened almost every year at some point where we end up with a shorter day because of weather. So you'll see with all the initiatives that Ross had undertaken with the various forms of permit sales for you know, our weekend preferred parking at $15 a piece, and the bus revenue, and then the additional parking area that we added with the new acquisition of property across Queensbury Avenue on the Runway 30 end. So, and using that, I think that new revenue was in the area of $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, somewhere in that area off the top of my head, but just for that one weekend. So that hatch mark area or that hatch mark block is the total revenue this past year. And I think the record numbers, obviously, that helped too with the donations on the airfield and everything else.
Rachel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On face value, I think this chart looks great, but I'm just wondering if we're comparing apples to apples, does this include law enforcement overtime, and does it include the time spent or given to reimburse to the town of Queensbury? Because the overtime for law enforcement was significant for the Balloon Festival.
Yeah, I don't have those numbers.
My point being, Jeff, is once you add in law enforcement overtime, our overtime is exceeding the revenues. On the estimates that I got from them just a few months ago, what they thought it was going to be, it doesn't. Our expenses on overtime are still exceeding what the revenue is. So I think we're getting closer, but I hope that in the future the board considers ways to, whether it be working with occupancy tax, whether it be collecting more of the fees, whatever it might be, this isn't the whole picture, because law enforcement spends hours and hours and hours, as we all know who have been up there, volunteering to try to decrease overtime. So I would just ask that we somehow incorporate a true overtime cost for the event, so we know what it does cost county taxpayers to put that on.
Yeah, and you're certainly accurate in your statement. The fundamental beginning of this was Jeff knew pretty much precisely a ratio of what it cost him overtime-wise over some historic data. And when we were looking for funding, monies, when we fell into that financial crunch, we were attempting to at least solve the DPW overtime. You're the one that brought the narrative forward, how much it cost for the Sheriff's Department. I don't believe that department's ever provided us with the specific overtime.
They did. They gave us, well, the years past I sent it on, but I'm sure they can give you this year now that it's accurate. But I just think in looking at the whole picture of what it costs, it's certainly a worthwhile event, brings a lot of people to the area. It's great for the people that live here as well. But I just think when you're looking at how much it really costs to put on, to not factor in law enforcement is a mistake, because it is thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Can I just chime in? Several years ago, I brought it to Oxy Tax Committee about providing some Oxy tax to pay for the overtime in the Sheriff's Department, and I was rebuffed by the committee, even though I was, I think I was either chairman or, yeah, I was chairman. I was rebuffed by the committee, so But we did try to get it out of Oxy-Tax. It does make sense. There is a lot of expense there. That and the car show.
Right.
These big events that he spends a lot of money on.
We just have, if I may.
Try.
Yeah, go ahead.
We just have a lot of discussions about law enforcement overtime cost, and I think it's worthwhile to be talking about things that may be eligible for different types of funding, but what they're actually going towards, and that's the car show, that's the Balloon Festival, and like I said, on face value, this looks great, but it's not the whole picture, and
Yeah.
hopefully next year you look at the whole
Did you understand that wasn't
Absolutely.
that wasn't the attempt? It
I've
was,
got it.
you know, we started off with baby steps,
I
and
know.
we've been successful.
Yeah.
I guess is
I
what
think it's great.
you know. It's getting better, but you're right
Yeah.
in so much as what it cost us. Travis.
I'd just like to say, besides the issue of expenses, as far as the revenue, total revenue is concerned, on an earlier version of this agenda, it broken down the largest section of the total revenue was donations. And I don't think donations in our pocket at all. It might have gone to other good purposes, but I don't think it's fair to go ahead and say, you know, we're looking at expense and revenue and put out a graph there stating that it's not county money, this is maybe good money for other people, but there's county expenses, some of which were not counted, and then there's revenue, some of which never been counted.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay, next item on the agenda, just want to give the committee an update on our runway 119 extension EA. We are still waiting on the FAA final approval of the document and issuance of a FONSI, finding of no significant impact. I do not have an estimate of time at this point. I just assure you that they're still working on it and finalizing their issuance of comment on that. At this point, I would anticipate it sometime in January maybe, but I really don't know. It's in their hands. As far as airport training and other activities, I just wanted to let you know that you know, Ross has been working part-time for us now, and we've conducted a lot of training at the airport. I've had 14 different individuals down at the airport training with our remaining our airport maintenance mechanic, Mark Sumner. So we're trying to cross-level the training in the airport maintenance procedures and safe access and safe conduct of those procedures, and get a pool of personnel to cover us. We have been lucky with the start of the winter season here so far, so it's given us some training time, and that's going well so far.
Okay. And next we have Wayne Lamont. Want to step forward for the FBO request for statement of qualifications and RFP.
He has a hot buzzer on it now. They all do.
Well, I'll come up here.
Where it's safer?
Yeah, maybe. Closer to the door. You know, I'm at that age where I need to get these things out in order to see what I'm gonna... All right, as you all are aware, thanks to the chairman, I've been involved with the creation of the RFP for FBO operations at the airport. I was at this committee a few months ago and had a list of 25 items that we needed to address to complete the RFP. And we've gone through those. There's still a couple items outstanding, some technical drawings that Public Works is working on. But Jeff, did you hand that out or no? Okay. As part of the process, we had determined that you know, we were looking at a two-part process just as a way to invite more responses, so that there wasn't a huge upfront cost for somebody who wanted to submit a proposal and submit a full proposal and then come to find out that for some reason they really wouldn't even be considered, so based on qualifications. So this has been divided into a part one and a part two. The part one is a statement of qualifications, which the purchasing office and myself have worked on. I want to thank Julie for her efforts on that.
We have met a number of times with a committee putting this together. I think we're at the point where we're pretty much done with it as far as all the input that we've received from the supervisors and from the advisory committee, and looking at the previous proposal and contract document that was out there. Brian has been working with the county's insurance provider to make sure that the insurance requirements are relevant. And Brian, I don't know, did Brian leave? No, he's still hiding back there. So Brian, I don't know if you wanted to talk about that at all, or? So, I mean, that was one of the things that we were concerned about, you know, the insurances that were in the previous contracts and proposals. We just want to make sure that the county was adequately covered. I think we're at the point now, we've made some assumptions based on committee discussion and some information that Ross had put out there. So what we'd like to do is kind of turn it over to the committee as far as the process and say, when do you want to release this? And what's the process you want to follow going forward? I believe that, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, hopefully by the 11th we'll have the drawings and everything else that we need to do the part 2 side of it. One of the things that we do want to stress is that the second part of this, the full proposal, will have a draft of the lease agreement, and it will have this would be basically the RFP. It's got a lot of attachments to it, and so we would have to. We're kind of structuring this that the second part is a base level of what we'd like to see, but by doing the statement of qualifications and the second part to the RFP, it allows for negotiation. It's not take it or leave it. This is what we'd like to see, and we'd ask that people submit proposals that come close to that. They may be higher in one area, lower in another, and that's all part of the negotiation and the review. At that point, then, that would finalize the lease agreement and some of the other documents that would go forward. So that's really where it's at.
So we have this today, and the committee can take that and review it. You're hoping by the 11th you have the RFP ready for handing out for review?
Well, the RFP itself, until it's released, has draft contract agreements and everything in it, which are, not subject to release until the whole document's been released. So
Okay, but
I would ask.
Well, my point is, for the committee needs to review it in some form or fashion, and I'm looking for the timetable on that. And would that be ready for the 11th? Because the next dialogue includes the 11th and the gentleman coming from Genesee County talking about that aspect of what they did. Just a second, let me.
Those elements, are ready for discussion. I mean, Brian has a draft agreement ready. I do believe, Brian, we're there on that. So, I mean, that's the meat and potatoes of everything is what would be in the draft lease agreement that establishes preferred rates and operation. So, the part 2, which also has some of that same information. Julie, where are we? I mean, that's pretty much at a yes, no?
Well, we're waiting for information from...
Right.
As attachments to part 2.
Right.
We're still waiting for.
Right. But I think it's, just my impression of it is that we're close enough.
Yeah.
It's still going to be in draft form until we get comments from committee members, from facility committee and the rest of the board members.
Right.
So I would consider it, even on the 11th, it'll still be in draft form. It'll still be a working document, and there may be a few gaps in it, but I think largely it would be complete by then.
Yeah, I mean, it is now.
And then we
pretty
can,
much,
and then we can distribute it to board members and other, county officers for review and comment, and then finalize the document depending on how much revision is required after that.
Okay, Claudia?
I'm feeling in the dark about the process. I have no idea what's happening on December 11th. That is a day that we have supervisor training, and I did not believe we had meetings that day. Also, is this document supposed to be confidential? Because I know there are potential bidders in this room. And also, to this document, where are the attachments? I mean, that's where, like, the meat of this thing is, and it's not included in this document.
Right, and that's what we were just discussing, that those attachments are confidential at this point, and so they're not, we did not come prepared to discuss those, and that, I believe the 11th was the target date for those.
They're giving you this today, okay, to review.
Mm-hmm.
You'll
Which is
have
not confidential.
Right.
It's not confidential.
And then we have some legal input that we're going to hear from our county attorney. December 11th, Ed Bartholomew, I think, is prepared to speak to the fact that he did acquire a gentleman from Genesee County, and they're taking over the airport to come and speak to us, and it's about the nuances of what they did and how they went about it. That is another option. In other words, if the RFP goes out, none of it's satisfactory, what comes back, there is an option, and that's what Genesee County did, and that's run it themselves. We have a gentleman that will come at 10 o'clock the 11th, and if anyone wants to attend from this meeting, he will be prepared to answer your questions,
I just have
etc.
one more procedural question. Is there a problem then with putting this out? Because it seems like the Part 2 stuff isn't ready yet, but we could always go out for the qualifications.
Well,
get that stuff back.
that's for your review. Similar to what you said, you're in the dark. You're handed that
Right.
document. You can review it. If you have questions the 11th, you can bring up whatever you want. Hopefully the draft will be ready that day to be given to you for your review, and then the committee will decide the forward movement of how we proceed. There's also some executive session and confidentiality issues as far as pricing and structure that we put in there that you'll need to chime in on, and that will have to, there'll be some guidance from our attorney as to how we move forward and what's best for the committee and the county. Ron?
And am I under the impression that this first piece of paper that we got today is qualifying those that, so if we send this out, or are we going to send this out and have it come back and a group of us or this committee say, okay, these 4 people responded, only 2 of them really meet the qualifications, now we'll send them the RFP. Is that the way it's going to go?
No, they will see the full RFP so that they know if they want to.
Okay.
So
this is a little, maybe premature, but this has to go with the RFP eventually.
That is correct.
Okay.
It'll all be released as a Part 1. The Part 2 will be in somewhat of a draft form, subject to negotiation. But it will set the parameters of what the county's hopefully is hoping to achieve, and how the structure would be reviewed or looked at, or the potential of breaking out some things separately or one FBO.
Right. A good example would be what's the county's share of gas sale, fuel sales?
Right.
What's that number going to be, and that's the negotiating. Okay.
Correct.
Rachel?
Chairman Gerard, I guess I'm very confused about the scheduling of events. December 11th was mentioned in passing by Mary the other day, and I followed up with Amanda and said, what am I missing on December 11th, because it's not on the calendar.
Yes, Ed had to, there was a series of dates that Ed could get this gentleman from Genesee County, who we thought was...
I understand that. Can I just ask my question, though? I
apologize.
get what you're saying.
that you're wondering about the 11th?
Well, the problem I have
that's all I can speak to.
The problem I have with the 11th is we have a meeting calendar, and of course you want as many people to come to this as possible. We've all been waiting to be able to see this attachment that we've been, months and months asking for. It was also my understanding this attachment's done, so I don't know why here today we're not doing an executive session to talk about it, separate and apart from the discussion with Genesee, and then have another executive session if need be, or whatever, after the Genesee presentation. But the 11th is training for new supervisors. You know, here you have new supervisors coming on board. You're going to reschedule the new supervisor training?
We're going to schedule it from the 11th. We have some new supervisors who couldn't make it.
Okay.
So we're going to try and push it back after the board meeting, excuse me, when we won't have it.
So to the extent we can change our schedules, all of us, for December 11th, to be here at 10, we'll hear from Genesee, and then we'll do an executive to talk about Part 1. But Part 1 can't be emailed to us, even though it's completed for us to review ahead of time?
I don't think it's complete yet.
It's not?
He's waiting for two things, and it'll be complete. Correct?
Can we get it ahead of time?
Who are we waiting on? Who are we waiting on to receive the information that we need?
We need,
The bottom line is you're going to get it the 11th. Do you have a problem waiting a week? You've waited quite a while.
It's true, we've waited quite a while.
Yes. And there's been a lot of work put into it, and the 11th you'll get it. Is that a problem?
But will we have another meeting to comment then? Right. Like,
Oh, yeah.
can we read it ahead of time?
No, you'll get it then. That's when it'll be disseminated, and there'll be legal expertise given, et cetera, some explanation, and you can digest it, and we can call for another meeting to see how we want to move forward.
And that document will be confidential.
Yes.
Okay.
All that, needs to be explained to us, because as we formulated it, and then we get into procedurally, going out and keeping it fair. That's what we've been trying to do with this, keep this fair and open to the committee.
That's why I grabbed these off the table. They weren't picked up by Don back there.
Go ahead, Wayne.
if I just can
Sorry, Don. You already have it. Give me those.
If I may add, if I may add a little bit, I did email Supervisor Gerard the other day, last week, on Friday, I believe it was, and said, asked him the process he wanted to follow. And given that there was already meeting scheduled for today, we were not at this point prepared to copy everything, get it out, have the legal technical type review. So Dan suggested that we, do the Part 1 today, just to have that out there, and that on the 11th we provide the full document. And there's a series of questions that and assumptions that have been made by the in development of this, the Part 2 and the draft lease agreement, that I was just not comfortable saying this is what the county should do, and I was asking Dan how we wanted to do the input to make sure that we represent in the RFP what the county wants to see. That's the second part of the discussion, and that would have to be an executive session, and we just weren't prepared for executive session today. That's the bottom line.
And when he's asking me these questions, the way I reference them is that I know that anytime we get a document, especially today, you don't want to talk about it. You'd like to review it, ask questions, make your phone calls, whatever you do. So that's what the attempt was today. Give out what he has. Then when he gets the other thing completed, we have this other gentleman come in. If he lends any value to us, fine. If he doesn't, at least we brought it in. It's another option. It's a different look. And then at that time, the draft could be disseminated. We didn't have to talk about it, et cetera. We could get rules, regulations, whatever the concerns were for keeping it fair going forward. You could take that home, you could digest it, ask your questions, we could schedule another meeting, and then we could get direction from the committee who is ultimately responsible for putting out the RFP. And I felt that was a controllable avenue to proceed forward, where the committee was kept fully in light of what was going on and all the work that's been done, and if they had questions or changes, we could do them in a productive way, scheduling the meetings, not throwing it in front of you and saying, what do you think? Unprepared. Rachel?
I just forgot my other question when we were talking. And in all reality, with the holiday schedule and everything else, clearly I won't be a part of that discussion come January, and I'll send my comments after reading it on to whomever the next facilities chair is. But I think it's kind of disappointing you as facilities chair, you'll be leaving and not be able to at least have that draft an RFQ out before you're done. So it would have been nice also on the timeline to have it out before the end of the year. So I'm hesitant to think that actually will happen. But again, calling attention to how long this process has taken, that from the get-go Travis has been saying this is not a quick process. But the 5-year renewal, I'm just hoping that in the December 11th meeting, I'm sure you aren't prepared to talk about it today, but I've heard a lot of people say, is that a good term, 10 years? Should it be 20 years? How should it be less than, like, I'm looking for some feedback from experts about that 5 renewal, and the people that were here before, how they felt about that 10-year contract. And I know there was a lot of criticism around the renewal piece, but is that something, I haven't heard anybody talk about the term. I mean, I'm not part of the committee that you guys have been working on, but what are the pros and cons to a shorter term, a longer term, and maybe that could be addressed on the 11th?
And those are the type of questions that I have, is, you know, what we did is we took what was currently in force, how, you know, the 5-year and 5. And, you know, that's the starting point. But those are the nitty-gritty discussions that I want to have to kind of finalize this, because we just made some assumptions. That's the starting point. But, you know, it's in there as a you know, there's some rates that are in there that you know, the chairman has provided input on, and Dan has. But, you know, is that how everybody wants to go? I don't know. So that's exactly the type of information, you know, that we're looking for to finalize this, is all those number type things.
Okay, so if you could just put that on the list for the 11th, that's my only feedback from this form.
Patty, do you have something?
No.
Is everybody clear moving forward now, pretty much? And the meeting's going to be scheduled at 10 a.m. Monday, the 11th.
And then do we know the next facility?
And I apologize if that, you know, I just saw that there was no meeting scheduled. I didn't realize that was a conflict. And I thought it was better to ask you guys at the meeting, because that's how I put it with Ed. I was trying to get this guy's dates, and, you know, rather than just post it that we had a meeting, I wanted to be fair and say, you know, the 11th is when this guy can come, and we'd like to do the RFP, etc., so that you're all informed at the same time.
I appreciate that. I just am hoping that we could also set the following special meeting for facilities, maybe now or in the next day or so we can plan that in our calendar during a busy holiday month.
Right, is it going to be like December 27th?
I hope not.
I hope not, too.
Why don't we see the discussion on the 11th, and, you know.
It's just hard.
You need to give 72 hours notice if you schedule a meeting, so.
I know that's the law, but it would be nice if we gave people more than 72 hours notice.
You need to decide today?
I'd like to.
Yeah.
We
Do we have the schedule for next month, Amanda?
We don't schedule committee meetings after the board meeting?
Okay.
Till January.
But you have an idea.
We can do, you
You have
can schedule,
your-
we just don't have any regular, there's no meetings
Don't you have
on
your
our
crystal
date.
ball, Karnak?
Like, I mean, the 18th, the following Monday would be,
Okay.
We do
fine with
boil
me.
water at 1 o'clock.
and is that
Even
good
in the
with,
morning at like 10?
that's good with me. Is it good for the committee?
I really appreciate scheduling this in advance.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, it starts at 11:30?
What's that?
At 11:30.
So could we do it at 9?
So, is that held here?
You want to just move it to the next day?
Want to move it to the Tuesday?
If it's done in an hour, it's still be cool. 10 to
What about
11?
11 on the 19th?
Well, right, so 10 to, the meeting's 11:30, we go 10 to 11.
We can still do it Monday.
How about 9:30? Because that gives us
Yeah,
an hour
9
and a half.
9:30
Before you have to go to Flatbread?
That Monday, you want to keep it
The
at
18th.
9:30?
Yeah.
9:30 on the 18th?
Travis?
Is that enough time frame?
Just a point of clarification, at least the portion where Mr. Hens will be talking on December 11th, that's going to be open to the public, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, and I don't know, this might not be the appropriate time, but when would you expect that the RFQ/RFP actually be distributed to whoever might want to see a copy of that, like, Rich Air,
Who wants to?
North American, et cetera.
When the county decides to release it.
It has to go to each prospective bidder at the same time. That's how the process
That
is
might be
there.
like January, February, March.
I'm assuming that the committee will tell us the direction to go on the 18th.
Right.
And we did discuss, input, other input that might be valuable that we missed, and you addressed how we could go about doing that, because there's a lot of negotiations with it. So we felt that if we got some good input, in light of the way we have to proceed with not opening up the cookie jar with everything, that we could add those comments or negotiate them if we had some good points or input from other sources.
To speak to that, members of the advisory committee, of course, are not officers, but they can pilots there and such, and offer a lot of weight on this, and they can have. So is there going to be some, maybe subset of this, maybe a redacted portion where, dollars and cents are crossed out, that so, a pilot can read this and say, there's a problem with just this conception, or it seems like there's something missing here. Those are the kind of things that might be valuable.
I think the concern with the advisory group is that someone sits on the advisory group that is probably going to be bidding on it, so it's not really fair for them to see the document before the rest of the bidders may see the document.
But could you redact it and make that available to anybody that
I don't think that's proper. There are other avenues to allow members of the public to see the document and make comment. It would have to go through the committee. I know that one option would be inviting people into the executive session if you wanted to. But I don't think it's appropriate to give any portion of the document to a prospective bidder before the rest of them have it.
Julie?
The other option that we will have is that we can issue addendums. So if anything comes, or there's any issues that you would like to address that is open to the public, we will have time to issue an addendum if the committee so wishes to make changes to the document.
Right. And I think that's, one of the things we want to make clear is that the draft lease agreement and the part 2 is a point for discussion and negotiations to begin. So if there's something that needs to be added, or someone comes up with a great idea or has a major concern, like Julie said, an addendum can be issued, or it can be part of the negotiation process.
Right.
Dan, I know this isn't my fight anymore, but a year ago we put this group together with the hopes of them weighing in on the proposed RFP or RFQ. And I don't know if you can invite Travis into executive session or some members of the group, but I mean, the whole purpose was to have some expert advice from this advisory group for the RFQ. So I hope that you weigh that heavily. You've, in the past, assured me the group would have an opportunity to weigh in on this, and I just think it would be a shame at this point to not continue to follow through with that in some capacity.
That was discussed in the core group, and we knew that there was people that would have some good points that we could consider. But as far as moving forward and what we were up against as far as doing it properly, we felt that those comments could come in and we could make those changes, and it would be productive with their input. It's just that we needed to keep things close to our vest to do it properly, legally, and purchasing-wise. But there was never any intent not to have that input.
So how will you incorporate the advisory group's input into this process moving forward?
I think once it's released and it's going to go for bid, then it's a public document.
Isn't it too?
And then they can review it at that time.
You'll do the addendums and you'll involve them at that time after it's released?
Well, when it'll be released, they'll get a chance to read it. If they have a good idea that was missed, they can bring an addendum, and then Julie can release an addendum to the RFQ. Because this is all negotiable. I mean, you're going to be able to negotiate this ongoing in a certain amount of time, correct? point?
Yes, yeah. I think what's important to keep in mind is that the entire RFP will be released. All that will be done at first is a statement of qualifications. That will, depending on the committee, that will be out there for probably a month, waiting. In that time, everybody has a chance to look at the Part 2 before that becomes final and released to those prospective bidders. The other thing is, I did come to an advisory committee meeting, and I will say that everything that they brought up was incorporated.
I hope you'll continue attending those during this time.
If I know when they are, I will.
They're scheduled for every month, well out in advance
So.
for the next year.
Okay.
In good planning. So Amanda, will you make sure he's on that list? Sure. But I think that would be very helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Part 1 and Part 2 go out together?
Yes.
Part 1 and 2, so, and then the qualifications of the bidders, that comes back first?
Yes.
And we select, the committee
That's
selects
correct.
who's going to bid, or who we're going to entertain to negotiate. Okay.
A committee, whether it's the facilities committee, whether it's a committee appointed by the chairman, there's some review committee of the board that's going to, yes.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Public comment. Anyone? John?
Hi, everyone. John Lapper on behalf of Rich Air, the current FBO. Just a couple of items. The status of the office building is under construction, as everybody knows, and that's going nicely. An issue came up this week with Jeff and Kevin, I think is flat, connecting to the utility lines. I don't know if that's something that needs to be discussed. Same as the restaurant and hangars that are already there, that the FBO puts in the utility lines, sewer and water at their expense, and they become county property. Anything else that we need to talk about, Jeff, on that?
Yeah, I think we're still waiting for a set of plans as part of the lease requirements, so we continue to ask for those. We haven't seen the connection details, we haven't seen the layout. Obviously we need to review that connection and the capacity of the existing lines, and so we're awaiting that.
Tom Center from Lease Engineering is here.
I'll just jump in real quick. Tom has given me the layout site plan, where they're going to make connections. We chatted yesterday, and provided some details on how they're going to connect them.
Okay.
On hangars 5 and 6, we're waiting for the FAA sign off on the environmental review, and Rich is ready to start constructing that as soon as we get that. Hopefully that won't be too long. In terms of the RFP, obviously he intends to participate in the process, so the sooner the better, and it sounds like it's now moving nicely, but just in terms of the timing and staffing and everything else, that it's better to know rather than to get to the end of the year and it's not done. I just want to remind the committee that Rich had put in a proposal last year at your request to take over all operations. It sounds like the opposite of what they did in Genesee when the county took over, but that's still on the table if that's how it goes, or if that's something that the full board is interested in. And then finally, if the T-Hanger grant is not issued by the state, Rich indicated that he would build the T-Hangers, and that's still on the table as well. So that's the status for FBO.
Anyone else? No other business? Motion to adjourn. Rachel, second by Ron. All in favor?